One of my favorite British comedies is called Keeping Up Appearances. So you know it features Mrs. Hyacinth Bouquet, B-U-C-K-E-T, a feisty woman who lives to impress. And she has no patience for people who pretend to be superior because, as she says, it makes it so much harder for those of us who really are. Assured of her own eminence, she spends her days trying to make sure everyone else is too. Her inferior sisters, Rose and Daisy, along with Daisy's smoking and beer-swilling husband, Onslow, are quite the challenge. But she's always willing to talk about her sister Violet, who married the turf accountant and who has a new Mercedes and a house big enough for a sauna and a pony. She wonders why her roses aren't as big as those next door, worries that the guests at her candlelight suppers are not going to be impressed. Episode after episode shows Hyacinth's determination to climb the social ladder in spite of those families' working-class connections, and all to the constant chagrin of Richard, her long-suffering husband. I wonder sometimes at the appeal of this show. Why do I find it absolutely hysterical? I watch these episodes over and over, and I crack up every time Hyacinth's snobbery leads her to ruin. Being stuck in the back of a truck where she was hiding because she didn't want some important church ladies to know she was waiting for her family outside a pub, or falling in a river after trying to host the vicar at a waterside picnic with riparian entertainment. Now, one reason I think it resonates so is that we live in a culture of comparison. We do it all the time. Someone drives their new car to work, and suddenly your car that you loved a minute ago seems old, dented, and tired. The people next door have a new living room set delivered, and now your house needs a complete overhaul. It isn't just things that we compare. We compare jobs, promotions, clothes, kids. We even compare ourselves against our own expectations. Most of the time we find that we don't measure up. Paul Angoni, author of a book called 101 Secrets for Your 20s, calls comparison the smallpox of the millennial generation. He writes, "What is obsessive comparison disorder, you ask? It is the new OCD. I've coined this to describe our compulsion to constantly compare ourselves with others, producing unwanted thoughts and feelings that drive us into depression, consumption, anxiety, all around discontent. It encourages us to stay up late on Facebook, pouring through all 348 pictures of our friends' 'My life is so much better than yours' album. And then it sends us to bed wondering why we suddenly feel so anxious. Obsessively comparing yourself to others, becoming more and more frustrated that your life doesn't look like theirs, is the absolute most effective way to take your crisis to unhealthy, eating raw cookie dough with a serving spoon levels. Like having to run outside to light up a cigarette, he says, our comparison addiction is uncontrollable and it's killing us. We live in a society in which we measure ourselves against other people who are measuring themselves against other people, and there's no objective measure for how high is enough. We always need to stretch just a little more in hopes of reaching this ever-changing goal. And what are we really hoping for in all of this? Contentment. We don't really want to live our lives day after day obsessively comparing ourselves to the achievements and status of others. We want contentment, to be happy with who we are and what we have and where our lives are in this moment. To know that we belong, to know that we are enough exactly as we are. When comparison isn't involved, we are content. But once we start measuring our lives against others, against what we could have, against what we think we should have, what we have disappears from our sight and what we seem to lack takes center stage. So I'm going to admit that I've had to stop watching the Home Garden TV channel when I'm at the gym. At first it was great fun, seeing all these shows with gorgeous renovation ideas, big, beautiful kitchens, professionally designed living rooms that open right up onto the perfectly manicured lawn, kids' rooms that are organized and clean, and each decorating item in exactly the right place. But I had to stop. Not because the shows did anything wrong, but because the messages in my own head got ugly, and I became overly critical of our less than beautiful home, whose current decorating style I describe as fraternity house meets Toys R Us with a little petting zoo thrown in for good measure. It's not pretty, it's not shiny, it's not perfectly manicured in any way. But it's home, and it's filled with two boys who love life, and two parents who are trying really hard, and two dogs who appear to be some kind of cross between a Labrador and a moose. It's not perfect, but it's home. Our chronic concern about how we measure up is surely not enriching our lives or our relationships. Rather than appreciating people or ourselves for their own unique qualities, our thoughts race to assess whether ours are enough or maybe better than theirs. Andy Stanley, who's a pastor at North Point Community Church, calls this living in the land of We are daily engaging in a lose-lose activity, he says. We may not even realize how destructive it is. Being richer or smarter or funnier may feel like a short-term win, but for ourselves, our families, our marriages, comparison is a game with no winners. Among other things, comparison, as Teddy Roosevelt said, is the thief of joy, an act of violence against the self, the surest route to breeding jealousy. Even Homer weighed in, saying, "Nothing shall I, while sane, compare with a friend. Can I be satisfied? Am I okay? Do I measure up?" The answer is yes. Yes, we can be satisfied. Yes, we are okay. And yes, we do measure up just fine. The poet Martine Price wrote this piece that's titled, "On Comparing Yourself to Others." I find it staggering how often people compare themselves to others. People who, in my eyes, are already pretty fantastic, looking at other pretty fantastic people and seeing all the types of fantastic that they are not, or at least are not yet. Sometimes I find myself daydreaming about corrective eye surgery, not because I am a corrective eye surgeon, but because too many people have warped vision that clarifies the fantastic in the people around them and blurs the fantastic in themselves. Of course people are different. Some are really funny, and some are really handsome, and some are really clever, some are really friendly, and some are really lucky that they tick multiple boxes. But I think the really lucky ones are the content ones that may not tick any box, but really don't mind being average. Because that's all anyone is in comparison to everyone else. That's how averages work. I once heard a friend say that the only time you should compare yourself to others is to make sure that they have enough. But I put it in Google and I can't find who said it, so either I should write it down quotes more often, or my friend understands the world on a much deeper level, or I understand the world on a much deeper level, but I think it's the first one and I need to write down quotes more often. You have to remember that if everyone compared themselves to others too much, then nobody would do anything. because they would all think somebody else could do it better or quicker or sexier, so nobody after Oscar Peterson would play the piano. Nobody after Timothy Dalton would play James Bond. And nobody after Michael Johnson would run 400 meters or the 200 meters or the 4x400 meters apart from the 3 other people on his team. I think the last line of the poem is crucial. Apart from the other 3 people on his team. How do we move from a culture of comparison to a culture of contentment? We get there, I think, by creating a culture of compassion within community. But before we can get there, we have to name a pervasive illusion that lives among us, and that is the illusion of perfection. All too often our minds fool us into thinking that we can and in fact should be other than we are. Perfectionism is defined as the compulsive need to achieve and accomplish one's goals with no allowance for falling short of one's ideals. Yet we know that if we were perfect, we wouldn't be human. Warm, breathing human life is a constantly unfolding wonder, not a static state of flawless sameness. Being alive involves struggle and despair as well as glory and joy. To demand perfection is to turn our backs on real life and the full range of human experience. Why, when we know that there's no such thing as perfect, do most of us spend an incredible amount of time and energy trying to be everything to everyone? This is the question that writer and researcher Brené Brown asks. Is it really that we admire perfection? No. The truth is that we are actually drawn to people who are real and down to earth. We love authenticity, and we know that life, all of life, is messy and imperfect. So if the perfect home and the perfect job and the perfect person are all an illusion, what is the reality? The reality is that we are all in this together. We need to transform our relationships with one another and with ourselves from comparison to compassion. And the way we get there is by recognizing our inherent interconnectedness. According to the Centers for Disease Control, a sense of belonging and being connected is crucial to our mental health. Abraham Maslow, the American psychologist, argued that needs for individual growth and happiness will not be met without meeting the most basic need for human connection. Without bonds of love and affection with others, he would argue, we cannot go on to achieve our full potential as human beings. The psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut proposed that belonging is the core need of the self. Belonging is the feeling of being human among humans, a feeling that allows us to feel connected to other people. If we can compassionately remind ourselves in our own moments of falling down that failure is part of the shared human experience, then that moment can become one of togetherness instead of isolation. When our troubled, painful experiences are framed by the recognition that countless others have undergone similar hardships, the blow can be softened. The pain still hurts, but it doesn't become compounded by feelings of separation. We need to call out and name the voices in our culture that tell us to notice how others have more, that others are more, do more, strive more than we do, and say enough. Enough with the comparison, because we know that we are enough. All of us are. Our connections with each other help us to move from comparison to contentment, with compassion in our relationships being the crucial key. We are groomed to believe that the best way to live is looking out for our own interests. But in reality, lasting satisfaction rarely accompanies that approach. What if instead we could pull on that line from the poem and to say the only time we should compare ourselves to others is to make sure that they have enough? What if instead of looking at others as a measure of our own value, we looked at them simply to appreciate and celebrate their success? What if instead of racing against them, we viewed ourselves as racing alongside, each of us trying to do our best? The key is compassion. Life is satisfying when we celebrate and cry together, genuinely talking and opening ourselves to one another, to the whole person with all of their beauty and all of their broken places that we may never see, the person standing right in front of us. So when you feel the obsessive comparison disorder welling up inside of you, you don't have to let it steal your joy. Try these words instead. I'm happy for you. When I say I'm happy for you, I'm realizing that your joy, your good fortune, it's not about me, it's about you. And your joy, your new thing, your child's amazing achievement doesn't take away the reality that we're all in this together. And with compassion for myself and for all the other imperfect, messy beings that I share this life with, I can realize that I'm enough. I'm content. I'm okay. You are enough. You can be content. We are okay. So I'll leave you with these words, which is a prayer from Mark Bellatini. Let's set it all down, you and me. The disappointments, little and large, the frustrations. Let's open our fists and drop them. The useless waiting, the obsession with what we cannot have, the focus on foolish things, the pinwheeling worry which wears us out, the fretting. Let's throw them down. The comparisons of ourselves with others, the competition, as if domination was the best name we could give to the holy. The cynical assumptions, the unspoken shelved anger, let's toss them. The inarticulate suspicions, the self-doubt, the preemptive self-hatred, the numbing bouts of self-pity, sink them all like stones. Drop them like hot rocks into a cool silence. And when they're gone, lay back gently and float. Float on the calm surface of contentment. Let us be supported in the still cradle of the world which is messy, imperfect, beautiful, and waiting for us. And I think we have some time for talk back if you'd like.